and finishing the script that you may be working on in your own script camp program, or maybe you're sort of just watching along on one of our many portals and venues all around the internet, and you are just working on a script for yourself that maybe you want to kind of get some pointers for, especially when it comes to what happens towards the end and in the third act. So hi, I'm Conor. I'm the teacher and host here at Script Camp, and today we're going to be checking in with a few students, and then we have a slideshow that we're going to go through, which has a couple key points on it. Primarily, let me just skip ahead to that real quick. We're going to talk about what needs to happen in Act 3, what makes a great ending and different types of endings, and some examples of some of my favorite endings from different movies, and like the different ways that you can tie everything together and make sure that the story is coming full circle and that you're accomplishing everything that you sort of need to. We'll look at an overview of rewrites and what it takes to actually take this finished script and improve it beyond where it currently is, because the first draft is like never the one that you're really able to do much of anything with. Most scripts are going to take kind of 3 to 5 drafts, with an upward max of like 7 to 10 maybe in some cases. And at the end, we'll go into what to do now once you have a finished script, how to actually advance in this career as a feature screenwriter, and what the future sort of looks like. And of course, we'll always have lots of time for questions. All right, so let's keep going with our check-ins. So we just talked to Andrew, and so let's keep going down the list, and we want to make sure to address any questions that you had in your pages. If you had a recent script that you read off of a blacklist or just another pro script in general that you want to talk about and tell us about, then now is a good time. If you're falling behind or need extra help, this also might be a good time to mention it, although we may not be able to do as much one-on-one kind of diagnostic work as we would in the lab. So remember, the labs are going to be Saturdays 4 to 6 Pacific time, and that's when we specifically have set aside like almost office hours where I will work with you on a scene, on a sequence of your script, on the log line, on any individual topic that you feel needs more explanation or that we've not been able to get to enough. Okay, so let's keep going on the list and look at who has questions about their recent pages, things that you are still wondering about or that you're falling behind with. Do we have... Is Cece new in this bootcamp and is just observing for today? Am I right there?
Yes, I'm just observing. This is my first day.
That's okay. Welcome. Thanks for being with us. You're at the end of this boot camp, so you'll be hearing all the sort of like problems that people have as they're trying to finish their stories today. But we will be starting a new boot camp after this. These run for 8 weeks, so we go all the way from idea to finished draft in 8 weeks. So you're welcome to come to that new session if you want to just start from the beginning. Thanks, Cece. Let's check with Holly.
Hi. I sort of had to stop for stuff, family stuff. So I'm just kind of listening in, and I'm gonna start up with the next when it starts on the first week.
Oh, okay. So you're going to join the next camp and try to catch up to where you are now?
Yeah, I'm starting to outline. I'm gonna just start fresh with my with the thing I'm working on.
Oh, start fresh. Okay, sure. Yeah, that's always an option. Any big problems that you ran into in writing the story itself that were causing you to feel the need to start fresh, or was it just sort of life stuff getting in the way?
Well, no, it's just been life stuff. My elderly father got COVID, and it's been kind of crazy. But I am outlining, which is really helpful. So
Sure.
so hopefully following your method will be easier than I've done in the past, which has been a lot harder.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, even if you don't manage to finish a script with this course or with any of the stuff that we do at Script Camp, at the very least you can sort of like find the methods of outlining and structuring and pre-writing that work for you. And even if you don't finish a script, just having those methods, kind of like investigating what works best for you, trying out some of the stuff that we teach here that may help you move forward, sort of taking stuff from that and incorporating that with your own method. That can all be worth the boot camp, even if a finished script is not part of the final deal. So yeah, sounds good. If you want to join the next camp, and just start fresh, that's a totally fine way to do it.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks, Holly. Nacho. Nacho's doing. You were doing a rewrite on voices, right?
Yeah, and I had a chance to kind of flesh out a little bit an idea for the next feature boot camp, so I'm pretty excited. It's a vampire story,
Oh, great! Is
which
this the Vampire
I,
Biker Gang one?
yeah, more like kind of like street gangs.
Hmm.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, for sure. Some almost like Shadowrun or like a cyberpunk thing, like Vampire Street Gang sounds like a very sort of almost like
Yeah,
fantasy cyberpunk idea, but it sounds awesome.
yeah. I've never done anything like this, so it'll be fun.
Maybe did you see Bright? It's a little like kind of sort of like a similar vibe.
Yeah, I think so. This is maybe more kind of like Menace to Society with Underworld, kind of like lots of guns and stuff, and I don't know. It's gonna be kind of silly, but it'll be fun.
I'm super into it. It sounds great. And you're doing this instead of the comedian thriller comedy?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Gotcha.
I think
Okay.
that this.
That's fine. Yeah, sometimes you change ideas at the last minute, or you have one idea that you're set on for a while, and then something else catches your eye. And that's what's the boot camps are kind of nice for, is those ideas that like just happen to catch your passing fancy, so to speak. You're not too attached to them. You just think it sounds fun, and you have a bunch of like kind of random images or ideas for it, and it's something that you think you could pull off in like 8 weeks. Not something that you've been laboring over for many years. That's kind of the best stuff for a program like this. Thanks, Nacho. Let's check in with Pete.
Hey, yeah, I concur a little bit with Holly. I'm pretty far behind. I think I got a little further since last week. Not much, a couple pages, but I still feel super confident with the idea, and I'm really gonna challenge to finish on time still. Uh, I just there's a couple other things going on related to film and the field that have just been happening that kind of got in the way this week. Yeah, so I'm just looking forward to kind of really attacking it. Yeah, so and I also just had a general question about the cycle of rewrites with cycle of boot camps, because I do want to jump on the next boot camp,
Hmm.
and that starts, and I have an idea for that. But what do you think, or how's the scheduling regarding the rewrite? Because I wouldn't mind rewriting this script also at some point.
Well, the Rewrite Bootcamp starts tomorrow. Week 1 is from 12 to 2 Pacific time. So you could come to that and get into a group, and you'll be working with a bunch of other people who are also, trying to just figure out what on earth they need to change and fix about the story. So we'll be kind of doing groundwork and foundational stuff in the opening class, which, if you're watching this, you should also consider signing up for, because, yeah, tomorrow, again, 12 to 2. Rewrite Bootcamp Week 1. It's a 4-week program that takes you from a finished draft to a better draft. So, what specific question did you have, or besides when it is? You want to know, like, the kind of stuff that you do in the class, or how it works, or what are you specifically looking for?
I mean, generally, I just want to keep doing classes for quite a while because I'm excited and I love this process, and I got a bunch of ideas. I'm trying to organize how to do a rewrite while there's another boot camp feature going on.
Oh, okay. You mean you're
What?
wondering if you should be doing a new script and a rewrite at the same time?
Yeah, because like that, I would love to jump on the rewrite for the current film, but that's 4 weeks. But then that's also starting the beginning of the boot camp or feature, the
Mhm.
next one, which I want to jump on. Maybe I should. Maybe I should just do one more feature and then do rewrites, perhaps.
Yeah, I
Or what do you
usually would
think?
not recommend doing more than one at the same time.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
with the way that it's set up, our new feature bootcamp is starting. The intro is next week on the 11th, so that's Friday at 4 p.m. That's the intro class. And then the program actually begins on the 18th, though. So if you actually start with the rewrite tomorrow, then you would be halfway done with the program by the time that the feature course actually starts. So I would actually, if just in your case specifically, I would recommend do the rewrite first and then join the feature camp, like on its whatever second or third week, and you
Okay.
should be fine.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, great.
But normally I do say don't try to do 2 scripts at once, or else you'll just end up failing both. Like you won't complete either one. So that is a way that I could see it working, just the timing lining up nicely this time. It won't always be super neat and nice like that, just because, the programs last for different amounts of time. Anytime I've seen someone try to do 2 at once, they haven't been able to finish either one or the other of them. But yeah, those are all options, and maybe something there works for you.
Okay, all right, great. Well, yeah, I'm just going to try to finish by the deadline. So, wish me luck on that.
Yeah, lots of luck.
Okay.
Thanks, Pete.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, so seems that we've mostly kind of fallen behind, at least amongst these students that have stuck with the course this long. Nice job, Andrew, being almost done, though. That's like, if you can make it through the end of a script within a boot camp time, that's like, it's a quick turnaround. So it's always worthy of, popping the champagne to some extent. And even if you can't, then you've learned skills and built tools that you can use to either continue after the program's over and finish that one, or just start a new one on your own afterwards. Okay, and remember, always check the Writers Lab if you need to come in and get extra help with anything. That's the office hours, 4 to 6 Saturday. Me and sometimes other guests will help you through specific problems in your project. That's included in the unlimited membership, so if you are stumbling over anything in your story, then there's no reason not to go. All right, so let's look at endings a little bit, which is what we're working towards, hopefully. I mean, we're in our third act now, which is the, after the dense chunk of the middle of the story, with the second act being what we call the movie, basically. We've now moved from the movie to we have to be moving up from our act break into 3 towards the climax, where we have brought all of the kind of like protagonistic forces and antagonistic forces into one sort of final confrontation or clash of some kind. In a movie, we like to see those things come to a big, explosive culmination or finale, which is why you see so many sort of kind of, coming-of-age stories or, growing up teen romance type movies will just be like, I don't know, a battle of the bands at the end, or we have to make it to the pasta making competition, or they'll kind of just add like a competition element towards the end, because it makes for such a nice kind of finale. It makes for a nice, we beat the bad guys and there they off they go, packing into the sunset, and here we are, we won, everyone's clapping and cheering, and it just feels very complete to sort of end a movie with a competition. Not every story feels like it's sort of building up to that, though, and it might feel a little tacked on if it's like, I guess, if it's too clear that you were just looking for a thing for us to do at the end. So what are some of your favorite movie endings, and why? So think of, is this satisfying with the big clapping, cheering finale? Does this leave you unsatisfied in some ways and with some questions left lingering at the end of the narrative? Or is everything all completely tied up? Is it a sort of, quote, happy ending or sad ending? What do you guys think? And, Nacho, do you have a macro to bring the chat up for me? Or did you already like
Yes.
me?
One second. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah, I have a way of bringing up the chat on this overlay, but every time we do a new channel, we need to type in a new secret code to make it work.
You can type it all.
How do you type it all? As in, how do you type in the chat?
Yeah, where is it located?
So, yeah, it's called Feature Bootcamp Friday. So, underneath the Feature Bootcamp tab, if you scroll down in the left side of your window, you can find all the camp chats.
I got you.
Okay, great. Okay, so favorite endings. You don't have to type it. You can unmute and speak out loud if you wish. What are some of your favorite movie endings?
And I'd say Romeo and Juliet from all the versions of Romeo and Juliet, and it's also West Side Story. And it's heightened drama that both characters believe that their most urgent needs are going to be met, and their desires are destroyed. Their desires are destroyed by fate. And everyone has to learn a lesson. A vicious, brutal lesson at the end.
Right. So that's obviously a very old story, not something that was just written for the movie. But did you find that even though all our main characters die and nobody sort of gets what they want, did you find that was still a sort of satisfying, tragic ending?
Yeah, because it was so ultimately tragic, and because all the versions of the movie, it's such a powerful story that I think the audience falls in love with all the characters. So there's real emotion when Romeo and Juliet and Tony and Maria perish and suffer so greatly.
So it's been a while since I've read the play itself. Does the story sort of continue? It doesn't just end with them dying, right? We sort of see how their death has impacted the families and the world.
That's correct. In
Okay.
the Baz Luhrmann version of Romeo and Juliet, the police chief of the Verona police force gives the warring families he admonishes the both families, the Warren families, at the kid's funeral at the end of the movie, and that has an impact because you see the mothers of both Warren families just crying and weeping over their kids' deaths.
Right, so that's, I think, an example of what we normally consider, like, we lost, like, unsatisfying ending, main characters didn't get what they want, or even all die. But, ultimately, I think those can still feel like it wasn't just a total waste of time, all these events leading up to now, if we see the impact this will have on the rest of the world. So showing, like, oh, this is going to cause the peace between these two families now because they've seen the effect that, like, the love of Romeo and Juliet has shown us that, like, we shouldn't have these artificial barriers between us because it only leads to more and more bloodshed, right? So we understand that the crux of the journey that we've just seen is about the event that caused peace to finally blossom between the Capulets and the Montagues, right?
That's right.
Right. Okay. So it would be I think it's a totally different story if they die, then it's over, versus having a few more scenes at the end that showcase the impact that your character's actions had on the world, and just sort of explain to us, like, why did we even bother watching all of this?
On on a different tangent, I've not seen Die Hard in years, but I remember it being a very happy ending where the main character, the Bruce Willis character, gets exactly what he wants. He defeats his nemesis, and he also restores his marriage. Mm-hmm. And so I think I don't remember exactly how it ends, but he has one of his sort of yippee-ki-yay moments, and people sort of party off into the sunset. And I think that's satisfying because you really like him throughout the movie because he fights against his enemies with such bravado and such humor, and then he gets exactly what he wants. He defeats the bad guys, and he saves his marriage.
Right? Yep. That's sort of the classic happy beat the bad guys ending. We beat the bad guys, we complete your character's internal journey as well, and we kind of understand that the internal journey has interwoven with this external one the entire time. And by the end, we ride off into the sunset on the horse with your lady friend, and everything is well again. So that's also that's the crowd pleaser kind of ending, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's sort of the assumption for most stories. Obviously, that gets subverted all the time, but like that will never really do you wrong as long as it feels earned. Other favorite movies that you guys have, favorite endings for movies that you would like to discuss? CC says, I don't have a favorite anymore, but as a new movie that I watched was Nobody, and the ending where his brother and ailing father go to battle with him, as in the main character. Yeah, so this is where sort of the characters that we've met throughout the movie join forces with our main protagonist, and there's a big showdown where they killed all the bad guys in like a ludicrously elaborate fight scene.
It was so dope, though. It was so dope how Christopher Lloyd comes out of retirement just to help his son. I think that was so cool.
Right. And do you think that it worked really well because we set up that Christopher Lloyd character early on in the movie as kind of like fragile old dad? And so therefore it seems super badass when he gets out of his wheelchair and picks up the shotgun and is like, let's do this one more time. As opposed to if at the very end we just, like, we meet the dad for the first time and it's like, here's my old dad. Oh wait, now he's cool. I think that the idea that we set him up so early on just makes it feel like he's making a bigger journey and like more is changing and more is sort of happening when that final alliance kind of forms. Did you feel that to be the case?
Absolutely. I think that the fight scene at the end was amazing. The only thing I had an issue with was I didn't understand how he transitioned from being a frail father who, he's very timid and doesn't do anything as far as get angry or upset. He just is very passive aggressive, and then goes to this guy. It's like a complete change in character. I didn't understand, his past. That's the only part I didn't understand.
It's a good question.
Like how we got there.
I can't quite remember. I think it was implied that the dad was a retired FBI agent or something like that, considering the main character ends up using his old ID, I think, for something early on in the movie. I could be wrong. But I'm...
No, you're correct.
Right?
You're correct.
Okay.
That is right. But I'm talking about the main character. Like,
right.
His transition. That was kind of weird. But so far, that movie is pretty dope. I think it would be in comparison, just the fight scene itself, to Die Hard with a Vengeance, or something of those. I don't know how many movies. It's like 5 of them. For Die Hard.
Die Hards, yeah, there's 5, and there's a bunch of books, and there's other stuff too. So don't even, it doesn't really matter. They kind of turned into superhero movies after a while. But yeah, that's the kind of genre which we call heroic bloodshed, which involves usually a giant, big shootout with all the bad guys at the end, where the heroes win, or sometimes die also. But usually, I don't think the bad guy ever wins in heroic bloodshed, unless someone knows a great example that I'm totally missing. But that's the kind of ending that we're usually looking for in that kind of story, where the entire time is about the main character becoming the kind of badass that could be the only one who could take on the villain. And then the final showdown represents them overcoming all the flaws that have troubled them over the course of the movie, and mending all the alliances that they need to in order to get their sort of team together and have one big kind of explosive climax, which works really well, and the audience will always be down for it. And in terms of action storytelling, that's kind of like the bread and butter of how endings work. Anyone else?
Actually recently watched a movie, older one, called Friday.
Oh, with Ice Cube. Yep.
Yeah, it's really funny, and I just love this movie. It's kind of a simple story, but just so well done. And the ending is cool because basically, obviously we're talking about endings, so I don't want to ruin the ending, but
no, it's okay.
There's the town bully, and he's really scary, and he really has a grasp on everybody. And Ice Cube's dad is like, don't use the gun. He's like, put up your hands, and you got to learn how to fight for yourself, And it basically becomes like the ending climax of the whole movie, and he stands up and does it, and he really, it's a great scene too. And then like everything's fixed basically, so it's like really kind of fulfilling. It's just one fight, and it's just in the neighborhood, but it shifts everybody's situation. And the other thing that's great about that movie is it sounds so like scary or like dramatic, but it's so funny. It's just so funny to watch all these scenes unveil, because Ice Cube, his looks and the angles, the cinematography, and the characters that pop in and out real quick. It's a great movie, so that made a big impression on me. Another one recently was a Brian De Palma film called Dressed to Kill, which had CC's riding Friday next. We'll have you on the floor. Okay, I got to get the next one. Okay.
Yeah, there's 2 sequels, I think.
I look forward to that. But so Dressed to Kill, I thought had an amazing ending as well. And I don't want to give that ending away. It's a kind of whodunit based thriller. Mm-hmm. It has a really cool ending. It's with Michael Caine, and I just love his acting. I think about that as well, the acting and the dialogue, because when you look at some of the scenes in Dressed to Kill, the dialogue is amazingly effective. It's just the cop. It's funny how they write the cop's dialogue. It's like that typical New York City cop. He really has that down, and Michael Caine's lines are really well written. He's a psychologist, and then it's acted really, really well. So those are two of the more recent ending or just films in general that I really, really liked.
Yeah, that's great. I haven't seen Dressed to Kill, but I do, of course, love Michael Caine. You guys can still hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you.
You can. Okay. For some reason, oh, never mind. I just wasn't seeing the audio input capture. Okay. So in Friday, I think it would also just be a very different ending. This also comes back to what I was saying about setting stuff up early on And the break into 3 and the finale being sort of like a contradiction of a rule that we have come to know and establish for the entire movie. For instance, this little old dad character is a retired badass and is not cool enough to fight anymore, and we set that up in the first act so that by the time that the end occurs and he actually gets up out of that chair, we really feel the weight of that journey. In the same way, Friday isn't a movie about Ice Cube's character fighting people all the time, is it?
Oh no, I think it's kind of about getting high.
Yeah.
Like it's just about like what are we gonna do? It's Friday. I think
Friday.
he lost his job.
Yeah, got no job. Yeah, I've seen it.
And it's interesting how it gets set up because he really didn't do anything wrong. Really, it's kind of unjust. And then he's like clearly like bummed. But then he's like, well, it's Friday.
Mm-hmm. And the whole movie, they're running away. They're running away from Debo, who is the
that guy. Oh my god, that actor! Oh my, he's so amazing. It's just so amazing. And he steals the guy's bike. They have this recurring shot where he keeps rolling up the block on the bike again. You hear the sound of the bike coming up the block.
Yeah,
this guy's huge, and it's like, why the heck is he riding this little bike?
Right.
Oh, but he's just showing everybody he can do whatever he wants, and he pretty much does. And exactly. he gets the friend to break into the house next door, which is totally ridiculous in broad daylight. It's so funny, but no, it's not about him fighting at all. That's part of the point. Is he's not a fighter.
Right.
He's a lover, so to speak. He's he's doing everything correctly. He's kind of getting the short end of the stick, and then they're stealing his money too on top of it.
Right.
So
yeah. So I guess I bring this up to say that the main character fist fighting the villain actually does represent a large growth for that character, because the whole movie they've been running away and hiding from the villain, and it's been about him sort of turning away from his responsibilities and the things that he needs to do, and like he wants to solve this. Early on, there's a scene where he either buys a gun or just like is carrying one around, and he's confronted about it. So we learn early on he's trying to take the easy way out by just having a gun, but really, the transformation that he has to make, Craig is the character's name, the transformation that Craig has to make is he has to learn to put himself in danger and step up and, be brave and actually fist fight Debo so the violence doesn't spread in the way that it would if everyone was using guns, right? So he has to, like, put himself in a situation that for the whole movie he would never willingly do. So it actually does, even though, you could say, like, violence being the answer is kind of not usually the, like, always the best way to take a story, but sometimes it represents something for that character. Like, it represents the fact that he has learned to take that responsibility to like be selfless, when for the most part in the movie he just wants to hang out and get high. You can see how the ending is going to tell you that the character has either overcome one of their main flaws or things they've been struggling with throughout the story, or sometimes that they haven't, and then they usually lose. There's almost no stories where the character doesn't overcome their flaws and they still win. That can occasionally work in comedies I have seen, but I don't think I can name a story off the top of my head where the main character refuses to change or just fails to change and then sort of wins anyway. But it's possible.
There's also a scene where it's like a Raiders of the Lost Ark type situation where he shows his heroism by avoiding getting gunned down.
Mm-hmm.
It's really funny how they do it, but it's like scary as shit. It's like, there's this total drive-by, and it's like, I don't know, you just look at that situation, like that guy's a goner, and they get out of it, like the Indiana Jones kind of thing, and it actually empowers him. He's like, wow, I have more courage than I thought.
Exactly.
I think it plants the seed for him to be able to face antagonists at the end and win. It's a very simple movie, but the direction and it's a great movie because there's no extra stuff that's not necessary. It just gets to the story. It's really well done.
Yeah, but I agree. And this comes back to what I always say in this class is that, remember, the break into Act 3, and this is the class on that topic today. It should not be something that could occur if the journey of the movie did not happen before it to support that and to show growth and like building towards this break into 3. if there was like no sign that Craig was getting braver or learning the importance of responsibility and like stopping violence instead of just letting it spread and like multiply, then it would have felt much less effective at the end if he suddenly was just like, okay, let's fight the bad guy now. So we need to show them like struggling with that thing throughout, and the journey of the movie is so key to us understanding how the final act break is going to work, and what sort of trait the character has now overcome that they now they become this sort of synthesized version of the values they always had with the values they've learned because of this journey. Thanks for these answers, everyone. So we can always kind of, I guess I have been sort of doing this as we've been talking, but imagine that the opposite thing happens, or that a different thing happens, or that the characters might succeed instead of fail, or fail instead of succeed. And we can always be thinking how this is going to change our experience and kind of change the themes and the takeaway at the end of the story. So, what was somebody mentioned Die Hard earlier. How would we kind of feel if John McClane died at the end of Die Hard? Would you still enjoy it? Would it be as triumphant? Would it be kind of a different theme, do you think?
There's no money in that,
There's no money in what, having your main characters die?
I'm making a joke about the studio, like Willis.
You mean there'd be less sequels if the main character died? Yeah, that's true. Less sequel potential, definitely. There's always prequels.
It feels like there could be a way to make that work, that particular movie, if I don't know, like he died in order to like save his wife or something.
Yeah, exactly. So if his death represented him over like completing some kind of arc.
Right. Or maybe if they had a kid or something. I don't know. Something like if he died for a reason, right? If he just like
if he just happens to get shot or bleed to death because he has like taken so many hits throughout the movie or something, it would feel random or wrong. Yeah, exactly. We like deaths, main character deaths. You can totally do. Some franchises make their entire like sales off of character deaths. But like it has to usually feel like it means something, or it represents the character either overcoming their key flaw and obstacles that they've been facing the entire time, or they are failing to overcome those things. If it's just like your main character goes up against unwinnable odds and they just lose because the bad guys are just stronger, those can work too. But even if you do that, we still like to know, did your main character complete their internal journey or didn't they? And that really affects what we take away from the end of the story. And like the ending of the movie is what sits with you when you're in the car on the way home from the theater, and it's really important. And you should almost always be choosing projects like based on, if you have multiple to choose from, which one do you have the strongest ending in mind for? Because like the ending is so key. People will remember it more than any other part of the story, usually. Let's look at some other opposite endings. Nacho likes Gone Girl. What if the opposite happened at the end of that movie? What is the opposite of what happened? That's tough to say. But and there's going to be big spoilers here. Let's say that Amy runs away and never comes back to Nick, and Nick gets arrested for being public opinion turns against him. They arrest him for being a murderer, and Amy goes off and lives scot-free.
That could work. I kind of wanted her to get caught, though. Is that just me, or?
I'm with you. We sort of always want to see villainous characters like get brought down in some way. But Amy's kind of too smart to. She's like so much smarter than a typical villain that she's kind of thought of everything. So it's the sort of story where she just doesn't really lose. She doesn't really win. I don't know. That's a tough one to sort of like say who won, who lost, kind of. But go ahead, Nacho.
Yeah, this is like a case of like. They lost and they lived happily ever after, or we won and we lived, scarily ever after.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think if they were to split up and Nick were to do something else or whatever, go to jail even, I think honestly going to jail is less dangerous for him than, remaining with her, and I think it somehow that entire third act is kind of like her deciding that, oh wait, actually he is repentant, and now I forgive you, and
Yeah.
going, and like, I mean, just it's kind of hard to separate the book from the movie in some ways. I haven't actually even seen the movie. I've read the script, and I've
Oh, you
read
haven't
the
seen it?
novel. No, it's one of my all-time favorite novels, one of my favorite screenplays. I've never seen the movie.
Oh, you should
Right?
check it out. It's quite good.
Yeah, but it's like, um, it's something that it's sort of like, the way it's written as a book, each chapter kind of reframes everything that just happened.
Mm-hmm.
And the screenplay is kind of like that as well, where, we're you think, oh, okay, Nick has one-upped her. No, actually, she thought of that before,
Mm-hmm.
and it's that was part of her plan. Oh, actually, I mean, it's it's something. It feels like it's just like sort of like, twist after twist, or continually reframing like everything that just happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard to even say what would be the opposite of that. But yeah, I think, for me, it was like it felt like a roller coaster,
Mm-hmm.
the ending.
Yeah, and I think that with that story in particular, coming back to some version of the beginning is really important, because we start the movie with they are happily married and together, and we even have those kind of nice rhyming matching shots at the beginning and end of Nick and Amy lying in bed together. But the themes of the movie are sort of about like, how do couples deceive and hurt each other? Like, what do you not know about your partner? What are they keeping from you, and what are you keeping from them? So, like, the idea of getting them back together by the end and sort of recreating the status quo of the beginning, despite all the horrible things that have happened between them, actually does really kind of cut to the heart of the story in a lot of ways, because now Nick is where he started, but now he knows what kind of person she is, and she knows what kind of person he really is. We have some questions in the chat. Is it the same as Simple Favor or Double Jeopardy with Ashley Judd? I have not seen either of those, so I can't say for sure. But I would highly recommend Gone Girl. And David Fincher movies just do this really nice thing where it sells every twist so well. Have you seen The Game, Nacho, or anyone? The Game movie by David Fincher?
Oh yeah, it's great. It's cool.
So good. And doesn't it really sell you on every single twist that happens? You're like, oh, now I get it. I see what's really happening. Then later you're like, oh wait, no I didn't. Now I see what's really happening. And it like, you buy every one.
It's with Michael Douglas, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and it's also cast perfectly for the writing, because his acting scope, he just really digs into that character where you really just completely believe he's that person. And then I think his performance is also bringing you through those scenes and twists. It's a great film. So, and the story is, I don't know about you, but I could not see things coming when I watched it.
No, I certainly could not. I saw it when I was in high school, so it was quite a while ago, but was a big fan. Cool. So yeah, that kind of, I guess everything that we've been discussing here kind of comes around to a couple different things. The first is that your ending of your movie needs to be a culmination of things leading up to this point, so it shouldn't feel like we go in a radically different, unforeseeable direction. We need to kind of like see the trajectory of where this is generally going early on. And it's not a terrible thing if your ending is, quote, somewhat predictable, because like an audience member who's paying attention should be able to somewhat predict what's going to happen, because that means they're paying attention. We're not trying to blindside everyone or trick them. So let's look at a couple other slides first before we get to more of the nitty-gritty of endings. But remember, this is just a recap of the usual format that I'm using when I'm writing mostly, 90-page thrillers. This is kind of where I lay these points out. If your script is going to be longer than 90 pages, then you may have to just adjust these benchmarks accordingly. But this is how I do it, at least. Remember, we have our intro, our catalyst, what we call trying the locks, where this doorway has been unveiled to your main character. Now they're trying all the different locks on it as the room they're in is getting slowly hotter until their fear of, whatever the consequences are, overwhelmed by their desire to change or to go through that door. We have the premise scenes, which are going to be 25 to 50, and remember that is basically the movie. The second act is your movie. So that's where we focused the last couple classes on Act 2A, Act 2B, because that's the most important part of your story. And before you have those sequences worked out, like, 5-ish rock-solid sequences that take full advantage of your premise and play all the games with your premise that we might imagine to be possible, then you don't really have enough to build out into a full movie idea until you have the core middle minute 25 to 50 of the movie down like the back of your hand. So definitely, if you have nothing else, focus on that first, and then you can reverse engineer the story, the rest of the beats from that usually. There's still more finessing to be done, but you gotta have the premise scenes worked out before you begin. Our midpoint raises the stakes substantially about halfway through. The escalation after that shows your villainous forces regrouping and taking their lieutenants that they have not yet deployed against your main character. Now they're going to use all resources they have access to, and certain costs are going to begin to be exacted upon your hero in terms of costs of physical health, mental health, relationships, and maybe actually losing friends or family, things like that. We hit the pit, the all is lost, which seems like the worst possible thing has happened, and your main character has either failed at their goal or they are on the verge of making that goal impossible, or they're on the verge of failing it. The pit of despair showcases them, reacting to this all is lost moment, and wailing, "Why has God forsaken me?" Usually, things are getting even worse for them, and it seems like they're further from their goal than they have ever been until the break into 3, which is some sort of rejuvenating moment in which they remember something they've learned over the course of the movie, or some relationship comes back to matter that was set up early on in the movie, or something that only this one journey could have supported occurs that allows your character to take one last sort of swing at the bad guys, having either overcome their flaw or completely failing to overcome whatever is holding them back, whatever is wrong with them, until the big confrontation. We clash all your action figures together until only, one or two of them are standing, but always do be looking for what is this option C, right? Because we can almost always ask ourselves, what's going to happen? This is a story about this hero against this villain. At the end, they're either going to beat the villain, or the villain's going to defeat them, and those are the options. But always be thinking in the back of your mind, what's option C? Could they join the villain? Could they reform the villain? Could the villain convince them that, in fact, they were wrong the whole time? Could a side character sort of take precedence as the central villain character in the story at that point? So, just keep in mind that your audience has seen a million movies, and so have you. So just by hearing the logline or the premise, we could, take a guess as to how this ends. And if if someone's first one of 3 guesses are correct, then you may consider that you might need to find something that's a little more surprising. It means that your ending is definitely inevitable enough. Surprising yet inevitable is kind of that key mantra that we're always going to repeat when it comes to endings. But there's a chance that it's not enough of one or the other. If it's not surprising enough, as in people can just guess it right away, then maybe it is. It's there's no such thing as really too inevitable, but it might be inevitable without being surprising, and it might be surprising without being inevitable if it's something that comes completely out of left field. So just things to watch out for. Let's recap what All Is Lost actually is going to be looking like in the late second act and the early, as we're transitioning into the early part of the third act of your story. So remember, this is the dip and the low point that makes that rise and that ascension in the third act so satisfying and so triumphant. It's because we need to see your character at the lowest point before we can watch that pendulum swing back the other way and really appreciate the fact that they are now going to, even despite this low point, they're going to climb back on that bike and go up that hill one more time for one more sort of big confrontation with the villain. And if you have a central strong relationship, like a buddy story, a romance, a friendship story, a mentor story sometimes, often the mentor, I will say, dies at this moment, but sometimes it can represent like a breakup between the student and the mentor. This happens in Whiplash or things like that. A parting of ways is often how we characterize this moment in the All Is Lost. So because we need to get your main hero to the lowest possible point in order for us to appreciate their ascent, it's not as satisfying to watch someone, fall halfway down a hill and then ascend half a hill. We normally want to see them fall all the way to the bottom of the hill, climb on their bike, then agonizingly work their way up the entire thing. So, that is the harder the journey that you can make for the hero, the more we're going to appreciate it when they accomplish it, assuming that we buy the reality of them attempting to do it. So make sure that, you aren't giving it to them too easily or making things impossibly difficult, or else you're just never going to get anywhere. So, this is usually going to be the worst possible outcome that your main character can imagine. So just by looking at the logline, you usually know what the All Is Lost moment is going to be. Because what does a standard logline format kind of look like? The answer is, when inciting incident occurs, or the catalyst occurs, Your adjective main character must blank conflict in order to or before X. Oh, that's the ticking clock or the bad thing that's looming in the background. That should either occur or be on the verge of occurring in movie stories for the most part. Until the pit of despair, it seems like nothing could possibly get worse. Until they absolutely do. Things do get worse. Your main character is now, like I mentioned, they probably lost a key relationship, either the death of a mentor or the parting of friends or lovers or something like that. They've lost all hope and they're alone. It seems like there's no coming back from this. They are trapped in a sort of metaphorical room with the killer bashing down the metaphorical door, and this is where they kind of say, goodbye, cruel world, in whatever way. That doesn't always mean life and death. So, our break into 3 will then represent that reconciliation or apology or breakthrough at the end of all of that, which shows that the journey of the movie they've gone on has not been ultimately fruitless, and that they are now going to sort of realize this ultimate truth that they have been avoiding or turning away from the entire time, or they might re-encounter some old ally, or find something that they forgot before in such a way that we are emphasizing that they have made an internal journey here. And now they're going to have to make this last swing at the villain using their new skill set or philosophy or perspective or whatever it is that they have gained because of the journey that we have been on. Does anyone have any questions about that? Because that's super important. I see no questions in chat. That's great. Let's keep going. So, we should almost always be choosing, remember, at the act breaks, that represents your main character choosing to do something. And maybe you're saying, this is a movie about my character being in prison, or my character being in the military, and they get direct orders, and they can't choose anything. They're just being told what to do, and they have to go into the final battle to take out the big tank that has been blowing up their troops the entire, third act of the movie. Now they need to, in order to do that, they're being ordered to go back in. So how is this going to represent a choice? Well, you need to show that there are other options in some kind of way. If your last act of your movie is going to be your soldier character has to go back into the fray and take out the tank, you need to have another character that's a defector that comes up to them and is like, hey, it's the night before the battle. I found a tunnel that leads us out of this field and gets us out of here. Are you coming or not? And so then, by extension, your main character has the opportunity to turn away from this, but because of what they've learned and because of they have come to value the rest of the squad mates in their team or whatever their journey is, then that is why they need to choose to stay and choose to fight and choose to take part in this climax. If they don't choose to engage with the events of either Act 2 in your second act break or Act 3 in your third act break, it's going to seem like your main character is a passenger in this story and not in the driver's seat of it. What do I mean by that? And why should our characters stay in the driver's seat instead of the passenger seat?
Because they control the plot.
Yeah.
They control where the story is going.
Right. I think your second way of framing that might be better, because they're not really controlling the plot itself, are they? But they are influencing the direction that it takes because they are, showcasing their development or lack thereof by making choices because, the strongest way that people can show us who they are is the choices that they make, right? So by the fact that somebody makes, a lot of the time, this is going to be sort of your second act break and your third act break are going to be two sides of the same coin. And so the first act, your break into 2 might be, say it's about a cowardly soldier. So it's about your soldier runs away from the war or tries to escape from training or whatever. And they get picked up by another battalion and they end up in the fight anyway. But your third act break in that case will be an answer to and an echo of that previous act break. And it's going to be your main character having this chance to leave. And they say, no, I'm going to stay and fight instead, even though I will probably die, because I've learned the value of, friendship or love or the relationships we've made along the way. Any of these other, whatever it is that they have been overcoming in the journey that we've been watching. It might also be them saying, you know what? No, screw it. I haven't learned the lesson of the story. I'm going to still run away, but usually those are tragedies where the main character loses. If they decided to run away again, and then because of that they somehow won, or it didn't matter, it just wouldn't really feel like a satisfying story. It would feel like, why did I even bother watching this? Okay, so let's keep going, unless we have more questions on this. Or questions from the chat on Twitch, Twitter, or YouTube. I think we have all that going. I have no way of seeing those comments, but you should join our Discord server if you're watching on those other places and then you can like actually type in the chat and talk to us and hang out with us, and it's fun. So any last questions about that?
I had a question.
Go ahead.
What are your feelings about when you have like a really central character that's kind of the audience really likes or loves? It's not the main character, then they basically abandon the cause. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of crushing. You know what I mean? I'm trying to think of. It's hard for me to think of an example. But I mean, I don't know how general the audiences react to that kind of situation, but I always get like humbled up, irritated, like what the heck's going on? That guy's like the best friend. Like how could he do that to his buddy? And some movies they go so far, you know what I mean? Maybe Godfather or they go the director like pushes it over the edge, you know. It's like I just watched even a movie like Body Double, guy's friend or whatever, one of his best friends or whatever, it turns out to be like the killer or whatever, you know.
Oh wow! But so you're asking about moments where a central relationship, like, kind of abandons the cause or turns on your hero towards the end?
Because we've been talking about like a hero kind of manifesting their decisions and stepping up to the plate and really facing the situation in the turning of the third act. Many movies have like another very strong character who changes the dynamic. You know, they become like the antagonist. It turns out that they are on the dark side, or you know, they're on the side of the bad guys. Just curious about what your thoughts from a writing standpoint are.
Sure.
Regarding that kind of characters.
Okay, so yeah, I'm struggling to think of examples of this myself, but I can see circumstances where you might want to have a central relationship turn out to be either a secret antagonist, or maybe they're just not strong enough to complete the journey with the hero. It just really depends on what the journey that your hero is making is. Like, we might have a time where their super strong, stalwart friend towards the end is like, I'm not strong enough to continue in this fight, we should go. And that's going to sort of be like what I've talked about a minute ago. You have to give them your hero an opportunity to walk away and to not engage with the events of the third act, to show that they are making a conscious decision to do that. In that case, having the friend be the person that's like, wait, it's too dangerous, don't do it, might make sense for those stories. It might be a time where we're making the ending sort of, you know, if it's all building up to one big battle, that's the inevitable part, but the surprising part might be who is that ultimate battle with. And if it turns out that one of your close friends is actually one of the villains, or maybe even the main villain, as some mystery stories kind of do sometimes, then that can like add a sort of surprise and like, you know, unexpected element to something that otherwise would have been very straightforward. So it can work for that reason. All I can really do with this one is just give you examples of why you might do that, I guess. Because again, I don't have in my mind a major example of, you're saying a central relationship abandons the cause or turns on the hero towards the end.
Or like maybe like Alien, I think. Maybe it happens a little bit in Alien, I think, or Alien 2. There's one of the crew is actually a bad guy.
Okay. You mean Bishop Ash in the first movie? Yeah. So that is an interesting twist, especially because I don't think up until then we had even really gone that much into how cyborgs work or like the idea that there were possibly cyborgs amongst the crew of the Nostromo. But I don't think Bishop was, or is it Ash or Bishop in the first movie? I can't remember. But I don't think he was ever set up as being a central relationship or even being like a good friend of Ripley. I think they sort of are just co-workers, aren't they?
I don't know. I think she really trusts him at the beginning. Like he's like kind of like the father figure a bit. It turns out
you could be right. I might be remembering wrong, but that's just something to amp up the danger at that point. Like the fact that we can no longer even, like, there's danger all around them. The people they work for are evil. The alien on their ship is evil. Even your friends are turning out to be evil. That's just all part of turning up the heat on Ripley and making her feel unsafe anywhere. There's no place that she is completely safe on the ship, and that movie is all about that kind of dread and paranoia. So I can see it really amplifying that.
Oh, so maybe like similar, you've answered questions I've had in the past. Maybe the solution is to keep it focused on protagonist, right?
Mhm.
And so if someone does turn, if you have this slight bump in the road that's unexpected, it doesn't derail the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You really just need to look at what that main character's journey needs, and if what it needs is learning they're not safe anywhere, or seeing even my strongest of friends may not be strong enough to take on the villain, and like just look for whatever is making that final decision as we break into 3, making that as hard as possible. Then like anything kind of goes. Like you can always have a relationship change late on in the story. Sometimes that can work to great effect.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So yeah,
thank
some
you.
kind of scattered thoughts on that, but I hope that sort of answered some of your question there.
Yeah.
It did. Great. Okay. Let's proceed with the slideshow. So this is what our break into 3 is doing. Remember, we cannot have this. The most important part of this, and if you write down nothing else in this entire class, write this down. The break into 3 should not be a choice that they could have made if it were not for the events of the preceding story. The entire movie's been leading up to this. And that takes us to our finale, the final battle. So we're armed with new tools and these self-discoveries that we've made, so the protagonist will synthesize what they've learned in Act 2 with the values that they always had in Act 1. We move in and take on the bad guys with everything we've got. This is the battle of the bands, or the big martial arts fights, or the big shootout, or maybe a big date, or like a wedding scene, or something like that. But movie finales and climaxes are all about... the entire time we've been escalating, and like every situation has been building up so that this is the biggest one yet, and that we are making sure to increase the stakes and the cost on your main character with every skirmish, so to speak, up until this main battle. Almost never should the finale be of lower stakes and lower urgency than anything that came before it, because it's all sort of been leading up to this. Nitty-gritty of endings. So your actual last line. I have a clip here from a Blacklist script called The Thing About Jellyfish by Molly Metzler, but you can look at, there's a couple other different things you can do. You can end on a line of dialogue, if you really want to. You can end with an imagery that sums up the point of the story in some way, the impact that this journey has had on the character or on the world, ideally both, or the emotional change in your main character, and all of this should always be going back to reinforce the theme and show that this has all had some kind of coherent point to it. This wasn't just random stuff happening. If it is dialogue, we're looking for a line that kind of tells us where we're going from here, how the speaker or the main character, which may be the same person or may not be, have changed, or how the world has changed as a result of the actions here. And what does the road ahead hold for our characters? What is the new kind of status quo? And what is the universe like now that all the pieces have settled into place? But usually we'd like to feel like beginning, middle, end. This journey is over, and even if this was just like one battle from a war, for instance, that's why we like to have those, sometimes they'll have that text that fades up at the end that tells you what happened after this, and really almost always will highlight the fact that this battle was key to winning this war in whatever way. Like, breaking through this line of the Axis forces meant that the Allies could take all of France, or whatever it is, that make it feel like, oh, that's why we watched all of this. So, like, that's really important with endings. Okay, so you can also look at this. Whoa, sorry about the glitchy slideshow here. We were talking about Gone Girl, so you can look at the nice bookend that this script has and the story has, where the first shot and the last shot are kind of, mirrors of one another that show what has changed throughout the story. We can also end a movie without neatly resolving all the conflicts sometimes. Have you guys ever seen a movie that you can think of that leaves a lot of things in the air, or a lot of things unfinished, or just doesn't really tell you what happens? And how can that possibly work?
Any horror movie, of course, the slasher, the bad guy gets away somewhat, and the victims who survived, are just wondering, when will this slasher, psycho killer, monster come back and try to hunt me again?
Yeah, that is pretty much part of the fun of the horror genre in a lot of ways. Is like, it's something that the audience has been keyed in to expect, so it never feels too cheap. At times it can feel like, how on earth did they survive that? Halloween 2018, Don't Breathe 2. But like, for the most part, we expect it, so we're not going to be too annoyed, just in the same sense that we won't be too annoyed if, like, contrivances occur so that at the end of your rom-com, the couple gets together and there's a happy ending. Like, the audience is never going to be too pissed about that. In a horror story, if the monster somehow lives at the end to kill another day, Sometimes your main characters don't really find out about it, and the monster is otherwise kind of out of their life at least, so it still does feel sort of satisfying to me at least. Do you see what I mean here, Andrew, where it's like, well, at least he won't be tormenting me and my group of friends anymore, but then it's like, he's still out there somewhere. And that still feels a little bit satisfying in the way that, like...
That's kind of pretty much the ending of The Ring.
Yeah, exactly. So your main characters are safe, but the monster is at large now, maybe even worse than before. But at least it doesn't feel like this was all pointless. This was useless for me to even watch. Though I will say there are some stories also where it's like they were doomed from the beginning. But usually that's kind of the point of those stories, and like ultimately that's the theme that like no matter what you're screwed when going up against a threat like this. So those can work too. But just like you got to put in the work to make it feel like we didn't watch this all for nothing. Like nothing was learned or gained, or like nothing changed. We're looking for change when it comes to movies. And so,
Actually,
go ahead.
The weirdest ending that I've seen, and I think there's a lot of frustration about this ending that was written about, was No Country for Old Men, where at the end of the movie, I guess there really wasn't a resolution, and the murderer kind of got away, and what do? Well, let's have lunch. I'll pour some milk for lunch. That's pretty much how it ends. It kind of ends with a shrug.
Yeah, that's a weird one. That is, I talk about that a little later on in this presentation if we go through we're not going to go through every example today, but that's one of my examples of an ambiguous ending where it's sort of just like, the point of this is that you wanted this to be some sort of satisfying climax, and that life isn't like that, and that this story isn't like that, and kind of screw you is kind of like where that story ends. It's like, this is about like societal violence and like man's cruelty to other men and these things, and like all of that doesn't support an ending where the good guy beats the bad guy and gets away with it, really. So that movie chooses to be, or that book too, chooses to be deliberately unsatisfying in that we don't even see the final confrontation where the main character gets killed by not even the villain, that he gets killed by other criminals that we only briefly set up early on in the movie. It's like normally that would be so unsatisfying, and it is deliberately so, because that is sort of the theme of the story. You can't like control or contain violence like this. You can't like predict how violence will play out, and you shouldn't play with violence like you shouldn't like pursue it for short-term gain. Like crime will, like getting involved with terrible, horrible people will end with terrible things happening in your life that you can't predict or control or like win, right? So that's sort of the theme of that movie, and I think it works for those reasons. Does that make sense, Andrew?
Yes.
Great. But yeah, you can see all the effort put into making you want that. Even remember that conversation that Llewellyn has when he's getting out of the hospital and Sugar calls him on the phone, and Llewellyn's like, yeah, you know what, I do have one thing to say to you. I'm going to make you a personal project of mine. Meet me at this place and this place. And he hangs up, and we're like, hell yeah, here comes the big confrontation. And then the main character gets killed by unrelated criminals like a minute later. Or not a minute later, pretty soon after. And we're like, wait, what about the confrontation that we just set up? And it's like, yeah, guess he shouldn't have been messing with criminals. People are violent and will mess you up. So that's sort of where that story lands. Okay, so that all it does kind of neatly tie in with what we're talking about. How can something still feel resolved even though we didn't get what we, quote, wanted? And obviously No Country for Old Men neither feels resolved nor sort of like what we wanted. But at the same time, that's an unusual story, and it's deliberately kind of subverting the normal things that we expect from stories. So what are some other ways that we can still make an ending feel resolved even if we didn't, quote, get what we wanted? And I'm going to go turn my light on because it's too dark on camera, but I'll be right back, and feel free to leave some answers in the chat. Okay, so, what are some endings where we don't get what we wanted, but things still feel resolved? What's a movie you like that has a sad ending?
Titanic.
Titanic. Okay, that's a great example. So, the
Well,
promise
obvious.
of Titanic as a romance story, so we probably set up for the entire journey that this is about Rose falling in love with Jack, right? And what do we want to see first?
I mean, you want to see him obviously make it, when in the frozen
Yeah.
water.
We want to see the main character and the main love interest both survive and then be together after that, right?
Yeah, especially in the final scenes because it's so close that he might make it,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay, so why does this ending... Well, tell us what really happens first, and then tell us why it works, and why do you think this is one of the most successful movies of all time, despite the fact that it ends without us getting what we wanted?
If I remember correctly, the actress who plays older Rose has a very loving quality, and it's really obvious that she wasn't defeated by her loss, because she's recollecting these events in the movie, and that definitely gives you a feeling of fulfillment in her heart. But in the moment, it's not fulfilling at that particular exact moment when there's the devastation, the hitting the iceberg and all that. Yeah. So
right. So maybe
to me,
we should recap just for those who haven't seen it, which I'm sure most of us have, but some maybe have not. So this is a story about a woman who takes a trip on a boat. She's a wealthy woman who meets and falls for a lower class guy, and then the boat hits an iceberg and sinks, and he drowns in the water, right? So
Yeah.
the fact that you're saying, yeah, I think that's a big part of it, is the frame narrative of older Rose, who we see in the present. Like, she's been there for while an excavation team is exploring the ruins of the Titanic, and she's along for that because she's one of the older survivors of it. Then at the end, we see that she has kept a piece of jewelry that Jack gave her all those years ago, and we sort of see what is the name of the main theme song of the movie, right? Her heart has gone on, and she's always kept that piece of him with her. But now at the end, what does she do with the locket?
Well, she drops it back in the ocean, I believe, right?
Yeah, she drops it at the Titanic, which is, remember...
Yeah, at the site.
She couldn't have just dropped it anywhere in the ocean. We only could have done this if she came back to the site of the original Titanic sinking, because she wants to sort of give it to Jack and say, you have always been with me my entire life, and the love that we felt actually mattered and meant something, and now I'm giving this back to you so that my heart can kind of go on in whatever way. So, that is the theme of that story, and that's, incredibly unsatisfying in a certain way, but also feels really sort of heartbreaking and, is really impactful and effective to say, just a person that you fell in love with for such a short time could stay with you for that long. That sort of reinforces the movie's themes about, the eternal power of love and the fact that it can, even if it's just a short, fling or flame with somebody, that can stick with you and change you for the rest of your life, right? But I think that we only really get that because of, like Pete said, old Rose at the beginning and at the end as a frame to show what impact this actually had on her. If this just ended as soon as Jack drowned, how do you think people would have taken the movie?
Well, it would have gotten worse reviews, I guess. I don't know.
Probably. I mean, it would have made people less satisfied with it. I mean, it would have still been sad. It's the same level of sad. He dies in either one. But this is sad in an unsatisfying way versus sad in a satisfying way. Because if he just drowns and he dies and that's the end, then we're sort of what was the theme of this? What was the point of this? How did this affect her? Why did we watch all of this? This just seemed like random happen. Is the theme of this story random happenstance will kill the people you love and there's nothing you can do about it? Is that sort of what we've been saying this entire time? And the answer is no. That's not really what this is. That's not why we're telling this. We're telling this because we're showing that Jack has lived with her in her heart or whatever for 70 years or whatever it is, and that that's why we watch this, to show that no matter how much time goes by, if you have that strong enough flame with somebody, then it will impact you forever. So in that way, that is my opinion on why that works and how that works, and the just small changes that you can make that can make an ending totally land or totally fall flat.
Yeah, I agree. I think if it's a big event like Titanic or 9/11, you just end up what everybody already knows happens. It's kind of pointless. So nobody really wants to watch that if it stops there. But yeah, I think your insight is really, really helpful.
Yeah, so having that frame narrative there showcases the impact that this journey had on the world and on the character, or both, which is almost always what we're looking for. We had a couple other entries in the chat. Let me bring up the chat. Whoop, there we go. So Nacho says, Grave of the Fireflies. That's an anime, and I have not seen it, but what the ending of that is, I believe the main character is trying to protect a little sister, right?
Yeah, it's one of the most depressing, I think the most depressing movie I've ever seen in my life. It's really, two orphans during World War II, Japan, mistreated by their aunt, and they're slowly starving to death, and they have a little tin of candies, and they run out of the candy, and they just imagine the candy, fill it with water. They try to survive, and it's really sad, and it's definitely a we lost ending, and no, screw you.
We lost, and war is just kind of does that to people, is kind of where this one ends up.
I guess so. Yeah. I mean, there is a little kind of maybe a vision of what their spirits might do after they die, at the end. But it's pretty sad. But I love it. I don't know. I like sad movies. That's a good question. I mean, I think I personally, I love any movie that can make you feel something, whether it's terrified, happy, or sad. I would say it never felt out of left field. It never felt like, if I was in that situation, would I have done something differently? It felt like I could really relate to the characters, and I guess, it's sad. It's a sad movie.
Felt realistic, though, I'm guessing you're saying, right? And so it sort of felt true to life. And if I remember correctly, This is inspired by the director's own childhood or experiences that he had. Is that true?
Oh, I have no idea. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it is, which to me almost always makes these just kind of flat tragic stories work a little better, because you're like, this is sort of this person's conversation with their own personal demons or their own memories or things like that, where it's them trying to work through and I if I'm wrong about this, then I'm very stupid, but I'm fairly sure that this is directly inspired by stuff that he and his own family sort of went through. And so in cases like that, where it's almost has that memoir kind of quality to it, then these just flat tragic endings work a little better, because you're like, yeah, life is sort of like that sometimes. But he ultimately survived and will never forget that this happened. And this is sort of like a key defining moment in the character's life, even if we don't really see how that ends up.
Yeah, sort of a cautionary tale, I guess, about war, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, a cautionary tale usually to me is one where it's you should have done this differently. Whereas you're I think you were saying with these characters, there's nothing they could have really done differently. It's I guess it's sort of cautionary on a global scale of this is what happens when you world leaders make war happen, kind of. But that one seems a little hard to nail down, and non-Western storytelling usually has, I mean, I shouldn't say less clear kind of moral points, because maybe they in fact are very clear points from different cultural perspectives, but just from the way that we are trained to sort of understand movie themes and things, it can seem like either anime or just, I guess I should say, Eastern movies and Eastern storytelling styles in general. At the end of it, sometimes we're like, wait, why did we watch that? What was the point of that? But it's because the audience is trained to look for different things than we usually are, so they can be a little more tough to suss out from a Western perspective, I guess I would say.
Right.
Or maybe I'm just really dumb. I don't know. Maybe I just don't understand Eastern storytelling. I don't like a lot of anime. It's true.
I don't either. I'm really not into animated, usually series or most movies and stuff. But this one, man, it's really it's a tearjerker.
Great. Thank you for that, Nacho. Check that one out if you guys are into being unhappy. And we have one more. Kim says, Gone with the Wind. I have not seen or read Gone with the Wind. Tell us, what is the ending, Kim, and why does it work, even though it's tragic?
It's sort of a story within a story of the tragic event that was the Civil War, but I would say that Scarlett sort of loses everything. She loses Rhett. She loses her daughter. She loses her best friend. It kind of looks like everybody's gone, like all within the same couple of weeks after she already went through this tragic event that is the Civil War, and it's just sort of like, okay, I'm crying and I just have all these tears, and it's just misery. And then in the back of her mind, she hears the voice of her dad saying, "Are you telling me that the land that we lived on means nothing, that it means nothing to you?" And she sort of realizes that she needs to go back to Tara, which is her original house that she fought so hard to keep. And it's sort of the land that's going to heal her soul.
Okay, that's interesting.
Deep, huh?
Maybe I haven't. I kind of want to. I should see it at some point, considering it's one of the most famous movies ever made. But so are you saying she fails at her goal? What's her goal?
Well, her goal is to get her best friend's husband. Actually, her goal
to get her best friend's husband.
Ashley. I know that sounds really bad, but she really thinks she's in love with this character named Ashley for most of her life because he's like the one that got away. But Rhett is the one that marries her and has kids with her, and so this whole movie she's like battling herself about this guy, only at the end to just realize that she never loved him anyway, and she always loved Rhett, and he leaves her. So I would say her motivation is to gain back power because she doesn't even have food, like during the Civil War, like she loses everything except for Tara. She finds a way to keep Tara by marrying a guy. Anyway, that's another side story, but she sort of gains her dignity by returning to the land. I would say, now that I think about it, the story really isn't about her love life, or maybe she realizes at the end that she has a love of her home and her way of life that surpasses the tragedy of her love life, I guess would be the theme. Yeah. If you have like 3 hours, I would say go watch it, but it is very long.
Sure. Yeah, that's interesting, and that to me, I mean, I'm sure that this would also just be viewed very differently when it first came out as opposed to now, and like the amount of satisfaction that an ending can cause does change over time. As like, well, that movie has a lot of cultural stuff going on about it. Didn't that come out in the 40s or 30s, perhaps even, in a time that was like not that long after the Civil War? So like, people's memories of it were much more fresh. They had grandparents, I'm sure, or like relatives who were more touched and affected by it. So like those things can be changed and read differently over time. It sounds to me like you're sort of describing that even though she loses everything, the South will kind of always be there for her. Or like the land that represents the South will kind of always be there for her. Is that what she sort of comes to understand?
Yeah, that perfectly.
Okay, so that you can sort of see from certain cultural perspectives that maybe that would be satisfying in a way, right? Where it's like, even though you don't get the person you love, and even though this terrible war has been really bad, at least your homeland will always be unchanged, and they can't take that from us entirely. Something kind of like that might sort of be the theme. I could have that a little bit wrong just because, like I said, I have not seen that story.
No, I think that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's it.
So it might seem a little problematic from a modern-day perspective to say, at least you got the South, the people that fought for the Confederacy. But at the time, we have to like watch these things with the understanding that they were made in a very different time by very different people, and like it sounds to me like that may not have been entirely dissatisfying to an audience who, was so recently, not like immediately recently, but in the memorable past affected by the Civil War more. It might be more satisfying for them to say like, oh, the land will always be there no matter what terrible things happen on it or to it. So yeah, something that I would be able to speak more intelligently about after experiencing it, but that is an interesting way to have an ending be where your main character loses everything and fails at everything, but still you salvage something out of it at the end of the day so the audience doesn't leave like hating their life.
I'm gonna have to remember that. Like, if I ever write something that's just everything ends, you get nothing, but there's some sort of key thing out of it that comes out of it that you realize, I think that's a really good story lesson.
Yeah, for sure. And it could be something good or it could be something bad. It could be we learn, never do that again. Like, never do that thing that we did to cause this movie to happen. Or I was arrogant to even think I could have won this conflict in the first place. Something like that. Those are always valid sort of dramatic arguments to make, too. Okay, thanks, Kim. Let's move on to our next slides. Types of endings. Basically, you can boil these down to your main character. One meaning they accomplished their goal, which is usually the thing that's written out in the log line. So an adjective protagonist must X or else stakes. The X is kind of what we're looking at. Did they do that thing? Did they lose that thing? Or is it sort of ambiguous? And remember, movies are going to be like or most stories, but especially movies, considering how focused a form of storytelling they are, they're going to be two sort of separate tracks. One is going to be your main character's internal journey, and one is going to be their external journey. And these two tracks are parallel to one another, but are always sort of interweaving and intertwining, and ideally trying to wrap up both of them in such a way that one has been completed in such a way that will motivate the other one to be completed as well, and they both cinch off at the same time. So, to that end, just because your main character, quote, won their external goal doesn't mean they're happy at the end. And we can have situations where, and there's a great lessons from the Screenplay video on this, which I think is about the movie Soul, the Pixar movie Soul. But you can have these endings where your main character gets what they want, but not what they need. They get what they need, but not what they want. Or maybe they get both, or maybe they get neither. But you kind of have to pick one of those four options, right? And endings where we won could easily be we got what we want and what we need, and hurrah, it's the end. We beat the bad guys, and now we're happily ever after. It could be stories where your main character succeeds in their goal, but maybe along the way they've realized it was wrong, and it's not what they want anymore, and any combination thereof. So we won or we lost doesn't necessarily mean happy or sad, and we should always move beyond these ideas of just happy or sad endings, because it's more complicated than that. So I always try to frame this in terms of we won at our goal, we lost at our external goals. We won at our goal, we lost at our goal, or sort of this ambiguous thing in the middle. What kind of genres are really very suited to we won endings? Where we beat the bad guy, everyone claps, we fall in love, and now the main character's life is just better after this. What are some genres that really like to have that style?
Rom-com.
Yes. In rom-coms, I feel I don't watch a lot of them, but it's my understanding that if you don't have that ending, you better have a really good reason why, because that's what the audience signs up for by buying a ticket to your ride. Other genres that benefit from we won, we beat the bad guys, the end. Which I'm saying very straightforward, but it doesn't mean that's a bad ending. Lots of great, very satisfying stories have that ending. It just is like, it's what we kind of have been trained to think stories are in Western tradition in a lot of ways. What are some other genres that really have a lot of this?
Great comedies that are not dark.
Yeah, lighter comedies, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Those usually end with although they have comedies are about losers and underdogs, right? And so it's, I would say, inherently satisfying for us to watch an underdog that is a good person beat a big oppressive villain that's a bad person, right? And so the primary goal of comedies is to make the audience, feel which way?
Sort of like things are now right in the world or something, or like justice is restored somehow to the world.
Yeah. Or just, I would say, even more broadly than that, just to make your audience feel happy, right? Happier than they were before they were watching this.
Right. Exactly, yeah.
And I know different people are made happy by different things, but the explicit goal of a comedy is just to make the audience happier. Which is not to say that you can't have lower moments for characters in comedies, but only ever really usually in service of it being happier at the end when they overcome those low points, and then we beat the bad guys and we win and we go home. So let's get one more genre that often has beat the bad guys endings, and there's a lot of these, so it's not too tough.
Action.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I was gonna say it used to be the superhero Marvel type universe movies,
Mm-hmm.
but I think recently I started watching a couple of the new ones, and I think they're changing the whole schematic or something because it get pretty dark and I just remember seeing
Yes.
Superman. I remember seeing Superman 1 in the movie theater with Lex Luthor, and it's just like a thrill, and it's like, he almost gets defeated, and then whatever. It's kind of simplistic. Now it's this like psychological drama, and like it's dark, and it's like people die that you don't want to die. You know what I mean? And like, so I don't know. Maybe I'm opening up a can of worms with that, but
No, you're right, and that I think is a response to the audience gets really used to one type of ending, don't they? It's like we've seen at this point 100 superhero movies. By the time that they started kind of changing up the formula and being like, oh, actually, wouldn't it be kind of interesting if sometimes the heroes lose or they win in such a way that it's kind of ambiguous, or maybe it turns out that they maybe think maybe they're the bad guy. But you can compare the ending of Superman 1 to the ending of, I don't know, The Dark Knight, right? Where Batman ends up losing his love interest, who dies terribly. His sort of a strong kind of friend character, Harvey Dent. He's not really his friend, but we come to believe that he is a symbol of hope for Gotham. Turns evil and gets corrupted, and Batman has to both kill him and then take the blame for what the villains have done. And it's not really kind of we beat the bad guys happily ever after at all. Those are like a response to all the superhero movies that were just very they became too predictable and not surprising enough. So we still have that inevitable, you got to beat the bad guy ending, or else it's just like, if the bad guy is still up and doing stuff at the end of a superhero movie, then you're setting up a sequel or something's very wrong. But you can see how we're always looking for surprising yet inevitable. And if over time doing the same thing over and over again becomes less surprising, so it's just inevitable, and if it's not both, then the audience won't be satisfied. So you can see how superhero endings that mess with your expectations of what, quote, should happen became very trendy for a little bit, and still, I think, kind of are. I believe there's even a line at the end of, what's that Avengers movie where they all lose the second one? I think it's or is it Endgame, or what's the name of the one where they just sort of unequivocally lose? It's not Age of Ultron. The one after that, I think, is the one where I think there's even a line where one of the characters is like, "Wait, did we just lose?" Which is as if it's kind of a meta joke, as in, in the world, those characters probably lose more. But in terms of those movies, the heroes losing had not really been done that much up until then. So you can just look at that as part of the kind of conversation that you're having with the audience, and that we're always trying to stay one step ahead of them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, as a side note, one thing I love about Mel Brooks is he takes the genre conglomerate and he turns it all on his head with comedy, and it's one of the best comedy ever written. He rather than shift it in another, he makes it comical. You know what I mean? He takes. Which actually, that's some of my heroes, are definitely the comedy world. But
I would say some Mel Brooks movies even maybe go to the extent that they go so far off the rails at the end that the audience is like, wait, what? But sometimes I'm thinking Blazing Saddles specifically, but in that one sometimes and sometimes in other ones, the joke to me is sort of how far off the rails it gets becomes almost hilarious. So like the last act of Blazing Saddles, the characters like break through the wall of the movie, and now they enter they break the fourth wall. They're in the real world now. It's like, I don't even really know if the whole movie set this up and was leading to this. That's more surprising than inevitable to me in such a ratio that like falls apart a little bit. But whatever, it's still a great movie. Who cares?
Yeah, I happen to love those kind of comedies, but
yeah, I mean, your reactions will vary. I think some critics have been like, it falls apart, but ultimately, it doesn't matter that much if the rest of it's really good.
Yeah.
Okay, we don't have a crazy amount of time left, but I will just sort of go through the basics of types of endings. I think maybe some of you have seen these in my other classes before, but just for the recording and for all the folks streaming on Twitch, let's look at just a couple examples of these. I mean, some classics, We Lived Happily Ever After. Those are almost always going to be, a lot of the time, those are the standard sort of default ending and what people expect. So if your ratio if you're getting too inevitable and not surprising enough, you may need to bump one or the other of those back. We won, but at what cost? Is sort of the heroes complete their goal, but the damage or the cost that whatever has been exacted on them or the world is just clear and evident in some way. We'll keep on fighting means like usually those work best in movies where the hero's goal was never something that could ultimately be completed. Like if they're a doctor or something, you're never going to cure every sick person. But we understand that this part of this example of that fight is over and done with, and whether we won or we lost, we'll keep fighting at the end no matter what. These endings where we launch right into another adventure right away, these almost always work best with sort of wish fulfillment type stories, right? Like, anytime that we want to see, we had fun with this character on this journey, and it's like, that would be kind of cool to be someone like that, then we want to imagine them having more adventures, even if we aren't necessarily privy to them, or we don't get to see them. If you ended a movie like, I don't know, Schindler's List with, and then, after this, guess what? The Korean War began soon afterwards. We'd be like, ugh, really? Like, we just went through all this pain and torment and suffering, and now at the end of all that, you're like, it's not over by a long shot. And then we're kind of bummed out by those. You can sort of sometimes do those, but very rarely do they actually do that. More often than not, that's going to be with endings where we're like, that was fun. The character benefited from that ultimately, even if it wasn't always fun for them on that journey. And at the end of the day, it's like, that just looked like a blast, and I want to know that they are still out there doing that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's a couple of other types on here that you can look at, but those are the main ones I want to focus on in We Won. There's still We Lost endings that we talked about quite a bit, and what genres are best suited to that ending. I would say dramas work really well with We Lost endings, especially real-world dramas, where it's like, in real life, often we do sort of lose and the bad guys do kind of win, right? At least in the short term. So in stories that are based on true events, having the characters actually lose at the end, or maybe, they never really had a chance in the first place, anything like that, they can make sense if we're sort of commenting on those real situations and saying, like, that really did happen, and it really played out this way, and in real life it was just as unsatisfying and unfair and uncool as it was here. So now you have gotten the full experience of that event in the way that I, as the storyteller, intended you to feel it. We can sort of be thinking about that when it comes to, like, tragic or unsatisfying endings, like sort of something like Fruitvale Station. It's okay because my journey was discovering my goal was wrong is a sort of interesting one. A lot of the time where you have, like, a sort of villainous protagonist, like, sometimes it can be like a Wreck-It Ralph type character, but although Wreck-It Ralph does sort of start that change much earlier, but if you have a character that is a villain for most of the story, then sometimes their goal can be realizing, oh no, I shouldn't have been this terrible of a person the whole time. And I'm thinking mostly of someone like Ebenezer Scrooge, right? So what is Scrooge's goal in most of A Christmas Carol? Isn't it sort of get back to my normal life and keep being the same, right? Keep being the mean old rich guy that I've always been, despite these ghosts and all the people in my life telling me, you're a terror, Mr. Scrooge, and these ghosts saying, you have to change, Mr. Scrooge. His goal is sort of get back to normal and keep being the way he always is. But then the journey of the movie is realizing that that goal was wrong. And by the end, by our final, our climax, he comes to see, oh crap, all of this has been happening for a reason, and it's because my goal was faulty in the first place. So we'll look at a few more of these. Let's see. The cautionary tale one, pretty common with horror. Your characters have failed to learn the lesson presented to them. A lot of the Saw movies kind of work like this. And now the story will ultimately end as kind of a cautionary tale, which intends to say, if something like this happens to you, then you need to learn this lesson that the characters didn't. And then you always have that kind of We Lost ending where, although the journey failed, it did leave some kind of indelible mark on the world that is going to continue to inspire others or further the cause in their absence. You see this in everything from Braveheart, 300, any war movie where the main character dies. There's like especially historical events often end with some version of this. And then we have these ambiguous endings that don't really kind of go particularly one way or the other in terms of did we win or did we lose, or sometimes it's a question if we won or if we lost in the first place. It might be that it's unclear if your external goal was even accomplished or matters anymore, but as long as your internal one is, then it's kind of okay, because the internal goal was overall the point of the movie in those cases. Sometimes you say some good came of this, some bad came of this, and it's just complicated overall. That works very well if it's based on true events, or if you want to create more conversation and you want to move the sort of conversation from the movie to real life in some kind of way. And then we have the weird examples like we're talking about No Country for Old Men. The point of the story is something different than what you were expecting or paying attention to, and you have been sort of duped into wanting it to go one way or the other, and thereby the journey is not just the characters, it's kind of yours as the audience member too, as you come to realize, oh, what I wanted was wrong, or was not realistic, or anything like that. Okay, we're to our last 5 minutes, so here's the quick recap of the process. If you are joining for another feature bootcamp after this, which you should if you're interested in doing another movie, remember it kind of goes with re-outline, then we go into notes document where you get into groups, and you are going to be assigned 2 different partners who will be giving you feedback, and you're going to look for commonalities in that feedback and use that to make your revision guide, which is going to be this comprehensive roadmap for the entire revision of the rest of your script. You're going to go through the rewrite using that guide and all the notes you've gotten, and then at the end you'll go through these extra passes for things like character or dialogue or action or any other just specific thing that needs work in that script. Bunch of common structural problems on these last few slides here, which I've brought up in many classes before, but it's always worth looking at if you are feeling that something is structurally not working. And then let's talk a little bit about when you finish the script, what's next? What are your goals? And how can you kind of move forward from here? So the first thing to almost always do is put the script away once this is done. This means that you will not look at this for a couple weeks, at least 2 weeks, maybe more, up to 4, 5, 6, maybe take a few months off if that helps you. But then that is when you will ideally come back to this, do a full read-through, maybe print it out, do a full read-through, just decide what needs to change, and then you'll move into getting your, you may do one more quick polished draft on your own just before you share it with anyone, and then you need to get those reads, find out the commonalities between those notes, and start to plan out your rewrite in the way that I was talking about in the last slide. So basically what to do next is, once you finish your script is either rewrite it or write a new one. To be a feature writer, you need a strong portfolio of, I say 3 to 5. People will say you only need 1 script, but really you need a few more than 1. But then you are going to build a portfolio of several really, really good ones, which is going to take, if you're just starting out at this might take a lot of scripts before you get them really good. And that's okay. And like in a few scripts, you're going to look back at this current one and say, wow, I sure have come a long way. So all this is to say that you shouldn't be starting to look at to whom do I submit my script to get repped, or to get an agent, or to get a manager, or to get money, or to sell it, or to get any tangible result at all. Like, for the most part, you're going to struggle to get someone to even read this thing, let alone want to pay you to make it and set up a company that employs more than 100 people and makes millions and millions of dollars based on what you've done here. If this was super easy to do, lots of people would do it, and in fact, very few people can do it. So your primary goals should be centered around improving as a writer as much as possible, which means go through, write, 5 more scripts, and then start asking yourself, okay, who can I send this to? How can I get repped after this? But remember, it takes about 10 years for the most part for someone to get going with feature writing from the time they first start. So your goal should be, after the script is done, wait a little while, ascertain or assess whether or not you want to rewrite it, and if you do, then get the feedback and go through that process and do that. If you look back and you say there's too much wrong with it, it's too bad, or I'm just not interested anymore, just move on and just do a new script, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. You need to, in order to be a feature writer, you need to be a generator of unlimited ideas, and no one good idea is ever so good as to overshadow, or it's not like one idea should be weighted so much heavily as so much more important than any of the others. Remember, you have an unlimited supply of these. You can do this forever, or you should build those skills to make yourself the kind of person who could just do this forever. And if you just lost the script you just wrote and every script you've ever written, you would still say, doesn't matter, it's fine, I can make 1 million more. Okay, so feel free to browse the last couple slides of this presentation on your own if you want to look at, some more tips on careers in Hollywood, some realities of, what this actually takes, and how doom and gloom it is to actually get really good at writing movies and be able to make a living doing this. Here's a quick breakdown of those actual step-by-step things, but remember, steps 1 and 2 are just get really good at writing movies. So your primary goal should be either rewrite or do a new one, or rewrite and then do a new one. Okay, so let's stop here for questions. We're at the end of this program, so we can look at what's coming up next, and we can take questions on anything for this course, anything we've talked about today, endings specifically, and third acts, or just anything else you guys would like to know. So, floor is open.
I have 2 questions. One's quick. Did you pin the assignment pages, the presentation pages in the chat? Because I can't find it.
The assignment
It's the
page.
first. I can't. I just couldn't.
The only assignment for this week is to finish your script.
I'm sorry. I did your notes. I can't find the document.
The document. Okay, I'll link it in the chat. Give me 1 minute.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, and I had a question. Just could you give some guidance on how to really stay on story? You know, when you're writing or filming or whatever, what that really means. And in a sense of introducing interesting elements that make your work really interesting and dimensional, but not get sidetracked, not paint yourself in a corner, not go down a dead end. Just a general attitude or approach that you have to stay on track, to stay with your goals, to stay with the story that you're writing.
Sure. So your problem is that you're getting distracted by better ideas as you're going through it? Or are you saying that you're just losing interest in what you are writing? Or what exactly is happening?
Well, for me, many times an idea pops up and I start writing that or jumping on that. And then later on, I realize that I'm kind of like stretching out the whole work maybe too much. And then I think maybe for the viewer or reader, it might make them more confused to what the movie really is supposed to be.
Sure. Okay, so
any ideas you have?
Yeah, so this is going to come down to efficient outlining, and like if you find that you're running out of interesting material, then that means that you haven't written a strong enough outline, and that the process of fixing this is going to be done while you are outlining, and you need to make sure that like you have written enough scripts and read enough scripts that you are able to tell, oh, is this sequence going to really be grabbing people and drawing them further in and utilizing the premise that I've set up and playing the fun and games that I have promised, but in interesting and unexpected ways and all these things. That will all become clear to you at the outlining stage before you even get to pages. Once you go to pages, your only job is to like really do the best version of what you've outlined that you possibly can. And if that requires you to drift off track and to like add something new or change direction, that's not a terrible thing. But like generally, you shouldn't be drifting too far from the outline unless what you have is way, way better. And usually, if you're having this problem, it's a reflection of the fact that you haven't outlined a good enough story. And it might not be more complicated than you just need to read 3 scripts a week and write 5 more full-length screenplays and then see if you still have this problem. Because my guess would be, if you did those things, and during the time where you were writing 5 more full feature scripts, you were every week reading 3 brand new pro scripts that you never read before, then you're going to start outlining more efficiently, and to the point where you don't have this issue where you're like, oh, I'm losing interest in this, or I thought of something better than this. You're going to find a way to condense all your best ideas and cut out the ones that aren't working, and just make that clear at the outline stage. I hope that answers that question.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure. So yeah, pre-writing, so important. And almost every problem you have with not being able to finish or feeling like this isn't good towards the end, it's going to come back to you need to outline better. Other questions? Let me check the text chat. Okay, no more questions it looks like. So that'll wrap today's class, which is the conclusion of this feature bootcamp. We do these pretty frequently, and the next one is going to be next Friday, the free intro, same time. And so if that is interesting to you, then you should come by on the 11th at the same time. And we are going to start with the idea and go all the way to finish draft in 8 weeks. So if you didn't finish in this program and you want to just wait until that one catches up to kind of where you are, just check the calendar, because then you can check what we're doing that week and you can hop in at the right time and you'll have a nice head start. You could join the Rewrite Bootcamp next if you want to, which all the dates are on the screen for you right there. And if you are watching on one of our other platforms and have not signed up for a script camp, go to scriptcamp.net and sign up for membership. It's just $5 a month for the basic, which gets you 2 classes a week. Then $50 a month will get you unlimited boot camps, writers' labs, events of all kinds on the server. So hope to see you there, and hope that you guys enjoyed this and got some stuff out of this boot camp. And even if you didn't get the script done, you've at least built those skills and worked on those tools that will help you in the future finish script after script after script until you become this generator of unlimited ideas. All right, thanks so much, guys. Hope that you all finish your scripts soon. and that you have a great night, and we'll see you around the server.
Thank you.
Thank you.